graduate of Cornell and an MIT MBA holder. Her career has spanned the full arc of fashion, from technical design at Nike and strategy at Boston Consulting Group to managing $500 million in global apparel manufacturing. She understands exactly how fashion is made, funded, and scaled across borders. She's here to dive into a topic that every ambitious founder needs to master, and that is realities of accessing funding today and how brands can prepare to receive funding. I warmly welcome Matilda Ceesay. Welcome, Matilda. So good to see you. I've been looking forward to your session.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been looking forward to being here. First of all, before I get started, I'd like to take a moment to thank the Minslayer team for having me. You guys, a lot of you probably don't know me or haven't heard of me because one, I actually hate speaking, public speaking. And two, I feel like a lot of fashion entrepreneurs in Africa or entrepreneurs in general get advice to death and given so much advice that's not really putting money in their pockets. But I was excited to join this panel because I love Men's Layer. I love the work that they're doing, and I love the fact that they're actually supporting and helping people scale their businesses. So I wanted to be part of this conversation because I knew that whatever they're doing is actually going to help deliver value. So when Tosin approached me about talking on this panel, she wanted me to talk about fundraising. And I will talk about fundraising, but I also felt like fundraising right now, honestly, it's a bit of a downer. It's hard in the ecosystem. So while it's hard, I think there was still valuable information I can share about what you do need to know in order to actually get yeses from investors. But additionally, I wanted to also talk about like, yeah, fundraising from investors or like traditional investors may be hard and they might not get it, but there is true value and there is an advantage that I believe that African fashion entrepreneurs have. And last but not least, share a little bit of data and information about how to actually deliver for those buyers and also like capture value. Before, thank you for the intro, but just, I mean, I guess adding a little bit more background because I believe before I start talking, like it's important to know my background and what I do in order to really understand if this, why I'm saying the things that I'm saying, as well as where the data and information is coming from in order to be able to make the decision of like, if this is something that's really going to be of value. So as Adzira mentioned, my name is Matilda Ceesay. I was born in the Gambia, but I've actually spent most of my life in the United States. I studied fashion design, but quickly realized that one, I didn't think that I have the capacity to keep creating in the way that is required to work as a fashion designer. But more importantly, there are so many amazing fashion designers already on the continent. And I just knew that like that wasn't going to be the best place that I could add value, right? So my first job, I actually worked in tech design. And the way I like to explain to people is that if you think about a fashion designer as an architect, a tech designer is an engineer. So like they're the person that actually figures out the specifications of how to like properly manufacture. So in a lot of brands in the United States, when you're working with factories, tech designer is the person that actually manages the tech packs and communicates with the factory in a way that allows them to ensure consistency and quality control. Again, my second job was, we would say, a more elevated version of that, which was product development. And I think about that more as like a project manager or even like a contractor, right? The person that really puts all the pieces together for you. After doing that, I knew that I wanted to be more involved in more of the strategy and the business side of the fashion industry. So I decided to get my MBA. I got my MBA at MIT Sloan, and then I worked at Nike, mostly in their supply chain and operations division, and then also worked in management consulting, BCG. If people are familiar with consultants, they basically get hired by companies to go and evaluate and really help them um, identify or solve a specific problem that they're working on at the time. And so, yeah. And then after working in consulting, I was a director of operations for Noise Solutions, which is basically a vertically integrated apparel manufacturing company, but the manufacturing was based out of Bangladesh. And the funny part, I took that job because I was like, Bangladesh is just as chaotic as needing to do anything in Africa. And I felt like it would be a very valuable opportunity. And so when I say vertically integrated, is that we literally start from the cotton plant all the way to a finished product, right? So some of our customers at that company included like Ralph Lauren, American Eagle, Gymshark, Zara, Kmart, like you name it, we produce and manufactured for them. Um, and now, in my most recent stint, I am currently the CEO and founder of Global Shop. At Global Shop, what we're really doing is looking to build the data and infrastructure layer to help African fashion entrepreneurs reach global market. And in order to do that, and like not starting from scratch, we actually acquired ANKA. Is anyone here familiar with ANKA? Yes, no, maybe. Okay. For those that are maybe not familiar with ANKA, you might be familiar of Africea, which is what the name was originally called. ANKA was founded in 2016 by African entrepreneurs based in Ivory Coast. It originally started as Africea, which is primarily um, a marketplace. And while building the marketplace, they realized that there were additional value for African entrepreneurs outside of just providing the marketplace, right? And so African Marketplace is what's now called ANKA Shop, right? And it is a platform that allows entrepreneurs to basically create their own storefronts, right? So we have several merchants and vendors that use it as actually like their website because they don't have their own websites. And you might be familiar with like brands like Grassfield and Ofure. Those brands all got their start from Africea/ANKA. And as a result, what the platform has is that it has credibility and trust, which is a very important part of getting Western buyers to purchase, right? Because when they go to purchase from a website, they're like, what is this? Who am I buying from? Or from a person, right? The platform allows people, minimizes that trust layer because we actually have like over 150,000 reviews on there. And a lot of those are 5 stars. So people feel like they can trust. The second thing that came out of the pivot from Africea to ANKA was ANKA Pay, which is a payment solution that allows merchants um, to receive payments from international consumers. So, right, you can either do that through payment links, or there's also an option where people can integrate their websites directly on ANKA Pay. And so we accept international payments. I know there's quite a few solutions in Nigeria that do that, but I would say the thing that sets ANKA apart is that we don't have that failure rate. And I'm sure, as you guys are probably very familiar, when sometimes, I mean, and I know this, Western customers are not the most patient. So if the payment is failing, they just kind of will give up, right? So you're losing purchases. And then last but not least, we also have Anchor Ship, which is actually one of my favorite things. And the thing I love about it is that like you're able to the platform compare and see multiple couriers. And the key thing that is actually an improvement that we did since I joined was we allow vendors to actually see the live shipping timelines as well as rates, right? Because depending on where you're shipping from, DHL might be faster, maybe FedEx is faster, or and also it might also be cheaper. So we're in our platform where we allow you to basically, based on your need in that moment, pick what you want. If you're going for speed or price, and optimize that. Um, And last, obviously, but not least, and this is actually not something that like ANKA we do officially, is that since I've bought the company, well, acquired the company, one thing I was able to add, because I'm also based in the US, is provide in-person experiences. We don't advertise this and we don't officially offer this, but example is like tomorrow, actually, we're having a pop-up experience for one of our vendors. She goes by Kira. Some of you guys might be familiar with her and might not, but she's been featured on quite a few publications because she specializes in prom dresses. And if you check out her website, you will realize that it's actually a very strong revenue driving business, because based on the price points, and if you read some of the articles, you'll see she sold at least 1,500 dresses last year, and now she's looking to beat that number. And if you do that math yourself, you can see that it's a very lucrative opportunity that she's been able to take advantage of, and we've supported her throughout, right? So now that I have provided you with like context of who I am, what I've done, what I'm currently doing, we can act and you can make a decision of like how valuable or like what my information may be. We'll get a chance to get started. And the and also apologizing for the long introduction. I just thought it was really important context before I just kind of start talking to you and giving you advice, right? Um, as I mentioned, Tosin asked me to talk about fundraising. And fundraising right now, the reality is that it's hard. But I think like while it is hard, there's still opportunity there. It's just a matter of like knowing exactly what your challenges are so you can address it. And second part of the presentation, I want to talk about, once you know what your challenges are, how to address it, also being able to properly communicate the opportunity and the value, as well as finding the right types of funding for your business. And last but not least, and this is actually my favorite part of the presentation, is to share a little bit about who is actually buying African fashion. Who are these customers? What drives them to make repeat purchases and come back again and again? And then last but not least, the type of decisions you can make about your product to actually get international sales and not just appeal and people getting excited on Instagram, right? So before I get started on the first part, which is talking about fundraising, I wanted to ask, has anyone here tried to fundraise or from VCs and traditional investors? Okay.
Mm.
Um,
No, on behalf of them.
thank you. Thank you.
Oh, someone's hand is up. Someone said yes.
Okay, great, great. Well, if you haven't done it before, if you have done it, you've probably realized it is challenging. And I can't see the chat because I'm presenting, but would love to hear maybe if you can write a little bit about your experience, like were you successful, like how is it going?
Okay, well, just go ahead. I'm sure
Okay,
we'll catch up with that.
cool. So if you are trying to fundraise, I think it's very important to understand what is happening in the fundraising ecosystem and why it may seem more difficult than what you thought it would be. I think I don't think, I know that in the like from 2020 to 2022, there was really zero interest rate globally. And what that means was that when investors were investing in things like bonds, treasuries, And they really weren't getting as high, they weren't getting a high return on those investments. So they were looking for a new asset class to invest in. So then in startups and founders were really attractive because it felt like a place where you could get a higher return. But now that interest rates have raised again, they're able to get more value from things like treasuries and bonds. And so that's why you're seeing like there's not as much funding in VCs, and sorry, in tech or like founders, right? And aside from that, unfortunately, when you hear all the noise about all the money that people are raising, most of that money, like a third of that, basically goes to the top 1% companies. And then only 7% goes to like the bottom 50%. So if you hear those figures, you know that like it might sound like there's a lot of money out there, but it's very concentrated. And then when you layer that onto the African ecosystem, it becomes even more nuanced and like I would say a bit challenging, right? Because in the 2022, you would see like that was peak funding era. But then in 2024, it actually went down. And part of the reason why it went down was that like the investors felt like they weren't, apart from the interest rate, investors also felt like they weren't really getting a lot of returns, right? They weren't actually getting exits. Um, and then I'm assuming a lot of, assuming, but in my experience, a lot of fashion entrepreneurs tend to be women. And when you look at the amount of funding that actually goes to women, it's like less than 2% in Africa. And then when you layer that on top is like when you get rid of the grants and you're looking at actually just like VC and investor funding, it's less than 1%. Um, and so that comes from the fact, like one of the main drivers, I would say it's like, sorry, aside from the difficulties of like just fundraising in general and fundraising in Africa, when you're working in fashion, you have to like layer in a third factor, which is like a lot of VCs, investors don't necessarily love fashion as much as they love software. I know everyone's hearing like all these fintech companies and software companies, they raise a ton of money and they're raising money and it seems so easy for them. And the reason why it's because when it comes to things like software, you build once and you're able to continue to sell it infinitely. And like the best example of this is like Microsoft. Bill Gates built the core of Microsoft in the 80s, right? And he's been able to monetize that, and his investors are monetizing that till this day. Yes, they do improvements, they make minor tweaks here and there, but it's the software for the most part, right? And they're not doing, right? When you juxtapose that to fashion and making a physical good, every time you want to sell something, you have to create a physical product. So you're incurring unit costs. And then you put a little bit of additional layer of like, there may be concern that what if you make something and it doesn't sell? And then you layer in high return rates, which then also leads to like your working capital being tied up as just like there's a lot of battles you're fighting as a fashion entrepreneur. And so with all that said, with the battles that you're fighting, you really need to be prepared and understand what you need to have or say or portray or communicate, that's the right word, what you need to communicate in order to get investors to say yes to you. Because whenever investors, especially a VC, is thinking about investing, there's 3 questions that they need to answer for themselves, and the answers to all of those questions need to be yes. First is they have to say yes to the founder. Second, they have to say yes to the market. And third, they need to say yes to your solution and what you're actually delivering. The first part, when it comes to the founder, it's like you. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And honestly, I think that this is actually a place that like most founders win at, especially fashion entrepreneurs, because a big part of this, especially African ones, is about resilient and like them feeling that you're actually able to also translate your cultural like credibility into like revenue, right? And I think that, for example, that is something that like innately a lot of entrepreneurs, especially fashion ones, I think are strong at because it's creative and it's storytelling, right? And so getting people to believe in you, right? But then second, when it comes to the market, right? When it comes to African market, and trying to sell products is like most VCs, frankly, they're looking for like $1 billion, like products with $1 billion addressable market size minimum, right? And that's while we do know like the African fashion apparel, like the African apparel community is currently like 73.6 billion and growing. They still kind of find or think that Africa is too risky, too fragmented, and it's too early. So in order to get past that noise, you have to really be clear about the data and provide like and give to make them enthusiastic. And we'll go through some of that data in like the second part of the my discussion. And then the last but not least, I think whether you choose to get VC or you're able to get VC or any type of investor, it's very valuable to understand who the diaspora consumer is. Obviously, caveating this is for the founders that are looking to sell outside of their home market. I know a lot of the brands performing really well, making beautiful clothes, have a strong following in their home market. But if you're looking to sell to a Western audience and a global audience, it's important to understand who the global audience is, what they're buying, and what you can do to be like what they're buying and how you can show investors that your solution is the thing that's going to drive them returns on their investment. So now that we've covered that part about fundraising, I want to take a moment to ask if people have any questions before I go to the second part about the reframe.
You can go ahead, Matilda. Once there's any question, I'll let you know. They're dropping it in the Q&A chat box. Yes, so I'll let you know.
Okay, great. So, I mean, I'm sure you guys are all very familiar about the opportunity, and you know that there's excitement about the products that you're creating, and there's excitement about African fashion in the world. But like, what do those numbers look like, and what do they mean? So here, the first figure that I think is very interesting is that like the 73.6 billion apparel market from Africa. And this number is obviously significantly larger than the second number because it's not just finished apparel, right? It includes things like cotton, it includes fabric, and it also includes intra-Africa trade. However, when you look at the second number, which is the 15.5 billion, which is still very large, that number focuses on the products in the trade that are leaving Africa and going to other markets currently. And when it's going to other markets, that begs the question of like, how large is the community or the number of customers that are looking to get that? And that's where you get that 200 million number. And those are people from like African descent outside of the continent that are your potential customers, not in like obviously excluding the ones that are not of African descent, right? So even if you focus just on the people of African descent, that is still 200 million potential customers for you. And then if you want to get even more specific and look at just like what that looks like in the US, in the US alone, like Black people, which are all the people, I mean, I'll take liberties here, would be considered people of African descent in the United States. And by 2030, those individuals are projected to have like about $70 billion worth of spending power. And there's an opportunity for you to get some of that, right? But that comes with understanding that there's like, even if there's skepticism from VC investors and traditional investors, there's real cultural advantage of you capturing this market, and no one else can replicate what you have. And so while when people talk about funding, we're mostly usually talking about investors and traditional investors. I think my opinion, I'm of the opinion that there's a really, I would say, easier route. Maybe easier is not the right, but I would say like there are other types of funding that include grants or funding sources from DFIs that may be better suited for African entrepreneurs, right? Grants are great because they're basically money that you get that you can do whatever you want, right? And you can get these through accelerators or foundations, and it's no strings attached. And I think those are more attractive than VCs because a lot of times when you get funding from VCs, they will expect you to hit certain KPIs. And and if you can't hit those KPIs, that could put your business at a risk. And more importantly, they take a they take a portion of your business, right? Now you're giving someone else a portion of ownership of your business when you've built something. So while VCs and traditional investors are attractive because they're a source of immediate capital, I would say finding grants are a bit safer and also sometimes easier to get. And then last but not least, there's also the options of like DFIs. And I'm sure you guys have heard of some of them, like the African Development Bank, IFC, GIZ. I know the British Council is quite popular, especially in West Africa. And some of these DFIs do provide funding. But the key thing for those is, I would say, is that they're always looking for job creation metrics. So as an entrepreneur, I would say being able to communicate how what you're selling and what you're doing and how your business is creating opportunities in your community is the key to getting some of that funding. So, okay.
All right.
Any questions? Oh, wait, you already told me if I have questions, I could.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now that we've covered a bit of the backgrounds on like funding and ways you can get it, we're now onto like my favorite part of this presentation, which is what the opportunity is, right? And as we've talked about, it's like the $15.5 billion opportunity and how you get it. I think the first part of getting that opportunity is understanding who your customers are. And those customers, from my experience and from the data that we see at ANKA, it comes down to like three buckets. There's the first generation, which are the children of immigrants, like, right, their parents move. And then the second bucket is also second and third generation, who their families have moved to whatever country they are for several years, and they don't necessarily have as strong as an attachment to the continent, but they're now looking for a way to claim it. And then the last, but definitely not least, is the non-African, not people that have no attachment to the diaspora, but just like are drawn to it visually, the aesthetic, they think it's beautiful, and they just love it, right? And so once you understand those customers, in order to really make sales, I think it's also important to understand what they're buying, right? And how to use those customers to build a sustainable business. And this here for me, I think if you don't take anything else away from what I've shared today, I think this is probably this is what I want you to take. And because I feel like this is what I personally notice as a gap generally in a lot of African brands. When we design, like the designs are so beautiful and the brands, like I love them, the buyers love them, it gets people excited, and you see a lot of excitement and discovery, but it doesn't actually translate into purchase, or at least sustainable purchases where they're making repeat consistent purchases from you. And that for me comes down to the fact that the designs are beautiful and are great for discovery, but sometimes there's a disconnect about wearability and what people feel like how much use they can get out of the garments. So like it's important to really have some core, easily wearable pieces that you can integrate into your collections that people know they can trust, they can always get, and they can buy. And especially for like the US and European buyers, having those core pieces that they can easily integrate means that they'll make not only multiple purchases, but you'll also see that the average order value will probably go up because they can rationalize how much wear and use they can get from a garment, right? Instead of saying like, oh, I can wear this for this one occasion, they can think about like, I can wear this for multiple times and multiple uses. And that's not to say that the exciting pieces are not important, because you absolutely need them. But a big important data point that I think that it feels like a secret when it really shouldn't be, is that if you look at all of these large corporation and large companies that make money, like that sell clothing, 80% of their revenue usually comes from just like 20% of their merchandise. And that 20% is what they build out to be like their core pieces. Those are the ones that like everyone know that they can always buy. And these are the pieces that people come back to buy several times. And they build, and but they still continue, and you do need to still continue to create new and exciting pieces, because you want newness to drive traffic and get people excited, but having your core pieces that you can basically make and your team can make even when they're asleep and aren't taking a lot of, I would say, energy, capital to produce, is how you really build those sustainable pieces, a sustainable business. And when we talk about the core pieces, once you figure out the core pieces, a way to get even more wear, and I would say more revenue for them, and I like to call this, is like to work smarter, not harder. Because once you know something that people love, you don't really need to make the new latest exciting design. Like so many brands that I've worked with and I've seen, what they do in order to win is that they literally will just reiterate and modify their best-selling pieces. Maybe you have a shoulder detail that you love, right? And you know everyone loves it. So you use that shoulder detail in a dress, in a top. Or another way to do it is that a lot of brands, they'll also, and you'll notice this in America, they'll offer the same winning silhouette in maybe a new color, a new fabric, a new print, to just kind of scream newness without having to work as hard and without having to spend additional capital testing designs, putting their fit at risk, or wondering if this is going to work, right? You know what's going to work. You know what's working, use it to keep using it to drive revenue, right? It's in a way, it's a similar model, going back to that software thing, where you build they build the software and you get as much revenue as you can possibly get out of it, right? Reiterating on your winning pieces is how you can do that. And this, I would say the last part is like taking everything that I've said, especially the part about reiterating and how to win, and giving you tangible examples of people that have done it, right? As I mentioned earlier, one of my vendors is by Kira, and she's doing really, really well. And the funny thing, it's not even funny, but the key thing about by Kira is she didn't start out as prom dresses. She's been on the platform for over 8 years. And we can see her evolution, where she did start with Ankara, then did other types of design, but eventually she realized that there was a demand for prom dresses and it was a source of constant revenue. And so she doubled down on that. And she's been able to build a very strong business by following the demand. A second example, again, is Afure, and I love what she does in the sense that if you pay attention to her collections, she will create the similar silhouettes or the same silhouette in different collections and new fabrics. And that is such a core win because at that point, you're not experimenting with fit, you're not experimenting with design. You know what it needs to look like, and whoever's working with you already knows how to make it. They just need to adjust for the fabric. Um, and the last example that I have to like show about like really being able to like double down and scale your business is Kai Collective. I don't work with her, but I think she's done a phenomenal job in the last couple of years. And the thing that I can say is that I've actually can pinpoint and see exactly when when she started to double down to build her core collection that people can buy all the time. I don't know if any of you guys saw, but last year she even had like a campaign going where she was trying to sell $1 million worth of this tank top. It seems pretty simple, and you're like, it's a basic tank top. And she did videos for them consistently. And I read somewhere that the month after she stopped the campaign, she actually sold $1 million off of that one style. And this tank top is powerful because it's so simple, but that's the beauty, right? And you can distinctly see her logo. She has these beautiful colors in it, and it's easy for a factory to produce. But more importantly, the Western buyer can easily add it into their wardrobe. They can wear it, they can dress it up, dress it down, they can do whatever they want to and integrate it very easily into their lives. She still has amazing, beautiful pieces that she creates every season that are brand new, but she also manages and balances it with the core pieces because ultimately it's about building a sustainable business. Um, I'm I would say thank you so much for having me. That's really the end of my presentation, but like would love to answer any questions that you guys have, but also to go back to the fundraising question, which is what Tosin really wanted me to speak about. I was wondering if any of you guys are looking to raise and like what if any of you guys are looking to raise capital, and what does that look like for you? But you
All right. Thank you very much, Matilda. That was really, really insightful. Thank you. So I have a question for you. In your presentation, I saw a slide that you showed different fashion brands and, some of them that had lots of funding in the beginning and eventually had to shut down. So I have a question, which is, what exactly do you think fashion businesses in the continent internationally are leaking money? Is it production? Is it distribution? Is it pricing? What could have gone wrong and what should we avoid as fashionpreneurs?
That's a really good question. Um, for the so when I hear that question, there's two things, right? I would say the one thing obviously that we struggle with, and I'm sure everyone is familiar here, it's the distribution, right? And it's like when you make your products, especially if you are fully in the continent and trying to sell them abroad, especially now with I'm sorry, I always don't use a friendly term for her, but the current president of the United States has made it that much harder for you to export your goods, right? I would say that would be the biggest challenge. And I'm sure like that's pretty it's something that like these entrepreneurs are experiencing on a day-to-day. However, I would say for the brands here that raised a bunch of money and didn't make it, it's actually scaling too fast. You get the VC money, and that's also one of, I would say, the things, warnings about getting VC or investor money. When they give you that money, it's not, there are strings attached, and they expect a return, and they expect a return fast. And fashion, because you're creating a product, it just doesn't scale at the same rate as tech companies. So when investors invested expecting it to get the same returns they would get in a fashion company, that's I would say honestly a misalignment on the investors' part. And that's also, I would say that's the other reason why founders need to be very careful about getting investors and getting money from traditional investors and making sure that you're getting patient capital and not just quick capital.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I have another question here, which says, for emerging brands, do you think it's better to focus on profitability first or growth when trying to get capital or funding?
I would say profitability, honestly, because that's their VCs, and it might sound like they will say growth, but if you're growing and you can't sustain your cost, when they decide to stop funding you, or you're growing and you scale too fast, more than like you scale too fast and they stop funding you, then your business is at a halt, right? I think a great example of that is Amicole. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar. She owned a beauty brand, and she's originally from Senegal, and it was great, right? It was growing, people love it, and all of a sudden, I think she was like, first she wasn't getting any funding, and then all of a sudden she got a ton of funding, and she just like, I have to take it, right? And when you take it, investors expect you to scale, and they want to get a return on that investors, like the wrong investors, right? And so what that prompted her is that if you read that story and look at her story intentionally, what I noticed is like, she expanded into more factories, she added product SKUs, and she was just scaling, right, to growth in order to just grow the business. But all of that scaling was not scaling she can afford, right? But because she had investors and they were pushing for returns and scale, that's what she fought to deliver. Rather than if there was more of a focus on profitability, that ensures that the business can stand on its own feet, right? I would say, so yes, that's what you should prioritize. But obviously there is a nuanced balance, right? You do need to also scale. But if I had to pick one, I would say profitability, especially for African and emerging entrepreneurs.
All right, thank you, Matilda. And then finally, what do you think is the number one mistake that fashionpreneurs make when they're trying to pitch to investors? What should we look out for?
Hmm. Um, I wouldn't call it a mistake, but I would say it's really goes back, and I'm like, where is this slide? It goes back to this three questions. I think they don't fully understand and answering these three questions. Because if you are funding and you're like, oh, I have this great, like, I'm great, I have this amazing experience, and this is why you should fund me. And I also see this amazing opportunity. If you're not addressing their concerns about the market and their lack of trust and addressing how you would not succumb to that, you're not going to get a yes, right? And if you say, I'm great, and this is how I'm going to fight against the market and know that I'm going to actually be successful in this market, but you're not properly communicating your opportunity, then you're not going to get that yes. And like vice in the last option in this, if you know the opportunity, you communicate that beautifully, you understand the market, you're able to communicate that you understand the market beautifully, but you're not selling yourself properly, then you're not going to get that yes. So I would say, I wouldn't call it a mistake, but I would say the missing piece and the missing piece of knowledge is understanding that, like, if you're going to be pitching to anyone, you should go there knowing how you're going to get a yes from each one of these.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Matilda. We have another question that just came in. And it says, my plus size inclusive fast fashion business, Work Chick Official, is just 4 months old. We are operating a combination of brick and mortar and online strategy and opened first in Port Harcourt, which is a state in Nigeria. But when I approach people, they ask us, do we have a store in Lagos, which is a major commercial hub in Nigeria? I have the funds to do so, but we are yet to be stable operationally and currently far from breaking even. Please, do you think it's a good idea to open a second branch?
I would say no. Um, I mean, first of all, you're the best person to answer that question, but instinctually, I would say no. Because one, your local market, one, Port Harcourt, I don't know how, I've been to Nigeria several times. I've actually never been to Port Harcourt. But like I would assume if there is some you do have market there, right? And then on two, you're also online. And also there is local delivery within Nigeria as well. So I would say don't force yourself or like jump too fast into Lagos if you're not there, especially if you're based in Port Harcourt, who's going to manage that Lagos store for you, right? Do you have people that you trust that are going to do it, right? So I would say you have to be very careful about distinguishing between noise and people that are actually going to buy, because I've actually at MM Lafleur, one of the key mistakes that they did, and at one of the key mistakes that I say they did was that, like, they launch into a product category. Oh, launch into a product category that sounded like it had a lot of demand, but when it came after it was launched and it came for people to actually buy, the actual purchases weren't behind there. So sometimes the noise is louder than the actual return you're going to get. So I would say, like, I guess my answer is no, but the answer you need to answer for yourself is deciding, is this noise, or do I actually have customers and enough customers to open a shop in Lagos, right? And then the last thing I will add is that I've already mentioned Kira, but like I have two other top vendors that sell prom dresses, and all three of them actually are in Ibadan. And they do it there, and they're selling and making money consistently. It is prom, so it is a little seasonal, but they're all doing very, very well and have been in business for several years doing it online. So yeah, I would say obviously, to recap, my instinct is no, I would wait, but if you are going to do it, you should really take the time to ensure, like, what you're hearing is not just noise of people gingering and being excited, and there are actually people that are going to be buying. Because if you open that store and no one's buying, then you're sinking money in rent, and that will ultimately jeopardize the long-term sustainability of the business you already do have.
Okay, thank you. We have another question that's come in, and it says, if a brand isn't converting consistently yet, what is the first thing you would look at? Is it product, pricing, or positioning?
That's a very good question. So I would say you have to look at where the converting, right? What do you mean converting? Where, at what channel is that
Yeah,
converting,
selling. I
right?
believe that's
Because
what they
if,
mean.
well, I guess what channel? Because if it's like, if they're looking and they're excited and they're going to your website, then obviously I would say it's probably not product, right? Um, and then if they're, when you go to the website and I would pay attention to what people are adding. And if you find that people are buying maybe the lower price items instead of the higher price items, maybe then I would reevaluate pricing. What was the last one? Sorry, I can't remember. Product
Positioning.
positioning. Yeah, positioning. Positioning, I actually think it's a little bit more complicated because it's you have to look at who are the other people that are playing where you are in your like niche or segment, right? And your type of product and what they're doing. So let's say you do workwear. I just want to give something different. Who are the other people that are doing workwear? Does it seem like they're having a lot of interaction, a lot of interest? If you can find out if they're getting a lot of sales, then that will be inform you if it's like positioning or not. It's really looking about like your specific market segment. That's the word I was looking for, and how that's performing. I would say that tells you about positioning. And also like, is that market segment overcrowded, or is it like, is there still opportunity for you in there, right? And how do you distinguish yourself? And like what's happening. And a quick tie to like, actually, sorry, the Kira, part of the reason we're doing the pop-up is that because of her success and all the things that were written about her articles and some of her peers, there's been a lot of prom dress people in Nigeria trying to sell prom dresses. From Nigeria to American teenagers. And so part of the doing the pop-up is like her way to further distinguish herself from all of the people that have just started and like are trying to capture the market, right? So I would say you have to look at what's going on in your specific market segment and what you're trying to sell to determine whether it's positioning.
All right. Thank you very much, Matilda. That was absolutely insightful and amazing. Please let's appreciate Matilda by using our emojis. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. All right, so we'll be taking a quick 10-minute break and we'll be back. So take all of that in, relax, and we'll be back for another amazing session. Matilda, thank you once again. See you all
Thank you,
soon.
guys. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.